being an ICT teacher for many, many years. I hope you can all hear me. Uh, I'm still very nervous when I'm using technology because it seems to have a mind of its own. So I will tell you some stories today. I started off life as a school teacher. And often school teachers, they just have an opportunity to meet one or two or maybe three principals during their entire career. But I moved to learn today. I was lucky. I got to meet hundreds of school principals actually, and that's not an exaggeration at all. We had 64 of them from Bhutan last year, so that really added to the count. And we've met principals of all kinds at Learn Today, from government schools, private schools, middle class schools, elite schools, boarding schools, and from different countries too. So I've met principals from Finland, I've met principals across India and in Bhutan. And one of the things that I learned really from this is that everywhere there are many great leaders in this world. And a lot of the leadership that comes from their hearts, not really from attending workshops or learning the science of leadership. And what really comes from the heart is what everyone's been talking about out here, that the student is at the center. So what really happens is that unlike, and this is something that's been spoken of, which J.B. Singh ji also spoke about, where he said that educational leadership in a school is very different from any other type of organization. And why is it different in a sense? One of the reasons why it is so different is that in almost any other organization, even in senior level education or higher education, the client has a voice and has a choice. But when we look at a school, there is neither voice nor choice to the students unless we give it to them. These are children who do not have that independence to actually speak their mind and to tell the school that, look, we don't like the school. They don't have that ability to make a choice over the school because that is a choice that has been made by others. They're not really part of this. So a great school will put the student at the center, not out of any kind of a market compulsion, but because it is in the best interest of the child. So I'll tell you a story in this context. There was one principal that I knew, and she told me this story. She was just walking past the office, and she noticed one long line of students who were standing out there. And she said, "What's happening?" They were filling in some forms, so they had to fill in the form. It took a couple of minutes, and they had to sign and get it stamped by the office, and then they would go back to their class. She said, "How long is it actually taking all of you?" And it was taking roughly one period. And so she spoke to the office and said, "Can't we do something about it? Why do children have to miss so much of their lesson for a 2-minute form?" So the office said, "Why don't you call one of the teachers to supervise, and the moment they fill the form, make sure that they go back to the class." This principal thought a bit and she said, "No, I don't think that works for me." So what she did was she asked the office to move their desk outside the classroom. She said, "You sit over here. The teacher will send out the child one by one. They'll fill in the form, you stamp it, send them back. The next one will come out." So when she did this, the child did not miss the lesson. They missed 2 minutes of the lesson, so it was not as if they had to miss the entire lesson. No teachers were pulled out of their task. The job got done very, very beautifully in a very effective manner. Maybe it wasn't so efficient for the office, but one of the things that this principal told me was, "I never do anything for administrative convenience. It's not part of my philosophy at all. Everything that I do is for the convenience of my students and maybe the convenience of my teachers at the most. That's it. The administration is here to facilitate the students' learning. The teachers are here to facilitate the students' learning. So this is why the student is always kept at the center. The next thing that this leads on to is that this principal had a shift in the way that she thought. And we had really, what I want to talk about is about these shifts, that you shift from a problem focus to a design focus, as Sir has actually talked about, the solution focus way of taking an approach to something. When you look at something which is problem focused, you tend to think of the problem, it becomes overwhelming, and at the most, if you're only trying to solve a problem, you're going to make very small changes. But when you look at design focus and you start looking for solutions within your own community, that's when you can have game-changing ideas. About 2 years ago, I met a whole group of principals from government schools in East India. And each one of them was sharing the challenges that they face and the kind of challenges that they would come up with. Our teachers are not at all motivated. They don't want to teach. Our students don't want to come to school. We have so much absenteeism. There's no point talking to the parents because the parents are least interested. They know because of RTE, the kids are going to be, promoted every year, so they're not bothered anymore. So they were discussing various solutions. What can we do? Shall we give them some punishment if they don't come? Or shall we give certificates as rewards? So there was this huge big discussion, and then they said, look, none of these things work. We've tried them, nothing works. So then one of the principals said, look, can we look at it a little differently? What if we look at what will make the children want to come to school? What will make the parents want to send their children to school? So once again, there was the design shift or the solution shift. So then they got a little excited, and actually what they came up with was that one of the things that they'd been talking in terms of, a solution was, let's call up the parents and tell them your child has not come. So they said, okay, let's do something different. Let's call up the parents and tell them something great that your child did. And so they developed this system where they said that every month we are going to call up the parent of every single child at least once in the month and say something great about that child. Your kid did something good in class. She answered that question so well. Or he was so polite with somebody. There were some visitors. He was so good in some extracurricular activity. So they started calling up the parents, and the response was so good. Sometime later, I was actually told that the teachers also got so enthused with this, so they decided that they'll have one PTA where every single child's work would be presented. They called up the parents and said that, look, your child's art is going to be presented, somebody else's homework was going to be presented, and so on. And that time round, they got nearly 80% of the parents to land up for the PTA as compared to the 10 or 15 who used to come earlier. So this is one way by which you look for a solution. So the shift in this case was to move away from looking at rewards and punishments, but rather to look at something which will make the child want to be intrinsically motivated to come to school. Despite all that extra work, the teachers were also very motivated, and so they would come to school. My next slide is about delegation, and I think most of you will say, yeah, we know what this is really all about. You need to trust the teachers, you need to delegate to the teachers. But I'm not talking about delegation to teachers in this slide. I'm actually talking about delegation to students, where you delegate to them the responsibility of achieving their own learning goals. So let the students themselves set their goals and work towards achieving those goals. That doesn't mean that the teacher has got nothing to do. The teacher has a lot of work to do because the teacher needs to teach the children how to achieve their goals. She needs to teach them self-study skills. She needs to teach them how to work with their peers. She needs to teach them that if they get stuck, they can ask for help. So there are a whole lot of skills that the teachers need to teach. So rather than focusing on the teaching of knowledge, you are now moving towards teaching of skills and teaching of skills that can make the child independent. So this is the entire mentorship process, But mentorship is again not enough. You have to monitor, are the children actually moving towards their goals? And if they're not moving towards their goals, then what is it that you do? You monitor them. So you see whether they're doing it. If they're not reaching their goals, you don't scold them, but you say, okay, what suggestions can we give you to go ahead? So that's not feedback, that's feed forward. Feedback is what did you do wrong? Feed forward is what can you do right in the future? And this is a method that we are actually using in a school. We've started it now. There's a lot of enthusiasm. We are keeping our fingers crossed. Let's see how it works. This is a school where students have been doing quite badly in their board exams. But the kids are really excited about this. They want to do this, and they want to feel that they have that agency, that they have that ability to actually achieve what they have to do, and that it's not something that's going to be fed into them by the teachers. So this is about delegation. And when you have a system like this, clearly you need to have a similar sort of a system for the teachers too. That is, you have to delegate to the teachers. The school principal needs to mentor the teacher, to monitor the teacher, to give inputs to the teacher on how this teacher can go forward. And the most important thing about delegation is trust. If it is students, you have to trust them that they actually do want to work, that they're not going to be slacking off, that if they're not reaching their goals, it's because they have challenges, not because they're lazy or they're not of good character. Same for the teachers too. If they're not reaching their goals, it's because they have challenges. You need to help them overcome those challenges. You're not going to label them as lazy, inefficient, or whatever it is that you want to. So this is about delegation, and this is something that we are trying. So finally, I want to come to this where what is this next step which goes beyond delegation? So it's about creating flat organizations. Now the organizations that we are very familiar with, there's a principal on top, there might be some heads of departments or a headmaster or someone, below that there's a senior teacher, below that there's some junior teacher, and right at the bottom are the students. And this is the hierarchy we are really familiar with. But when we look at something like a flat organization, and this again is something that Sir talked about just now, where everyone has a certain responsibility and everyone is doing something in a certain way where they are helping each other out. The student is once again at the center, and everyone else is working as a team towards making the student achieve his or her learning goals. And the story that I want to tell you for this one is that again, in a school that I have worked with, a junior teacher is in charge of the annual day. And she has a team of teachers who are helping her actually make sure that the annual day is a successful event. And who are the members of this team? One of them is her own HOD. And she gives instructions to her own HOD on what to do for the annual day, and the HOD will follow those and report back to this teacher. Another member of her team is the school principal. So she gives instructions to the principal on what needs to be done for the annual day, and the principal takes that on and completes those responsibilities under the guidance of this teacher. That is a flat organization. There are some areas where the principal is the ultimate authority, but when it comes to the annual day, that teacher is the ultimate authority. So every single teacher in this school has a responsibility, has a team under her, and that team could be just about anyone. The whole point is that this team has to work together. So this is not a democracy. It's a flat organization. It's an organization where everyone is a leader in some way. And this is equally true even on the administrative side. There's a very junior person from the admin side who is in charge of taking care of the maintenance in the estate. So she does a round around the school campus every day, and then she figures out what are all the repairs that are required, and then she calls the maintenance people and says that this is what you need to do, and they have to follow her instructions even though she's a very junior person. So they know that in this matter, she is the authority and she is the person to whom they have to actually report to and complete the work. So every single person in this school has got some area where they are actually supreme, where they are leaders. So to wrap up, if we are looking at a culture where every stakeholder is a leader, where the students are also leaders, where there's leadership, ownership, and autonomy, and these are the motivating factors rather than rewards and punishments, and where they're supported by empathy, trust, mentorship, and also by self-monitoring. They support themselves by monitoring themselves. So when you have a culture like this, you won't find a good school, you'll actually find a great school.